So in my life, when I think about the different kind of spiritual disciplines I engage in, some of them are a little easier for me and some of them are a lot more difficult. And this notion of atonement as a spiritual practice falls into the difficult category for me, and I'm guessing it does for a lot of people. I know that in the most traditional sense, when we talk about atonement in religion, it's usually about people getting back in right relationship with God. But to be honest, that's not the kind of spiritual question that keeps me up tossing and turning at night. Usually when I'm really in a moment of struggle, it's about atonement and right relationship with other human beings in my life, sometimes the people that are closest to me. You know, I think perhaps at this time in our society, as a people, that old universalist message of unconditional love is probably more relevant than it has been in a long time. I look and I see that as a society, the country that I live in tends to have a pretty shallow way of measuring human value to begin with. If I look at the TV or movies or advertising, the main message I get is that my human worth is determined by the number that's in my bank account or where I live or what I can buy and sell. I also know that the political climate in the world and in my society is one where things are polarized and we have a very hard time forgiving one another for our imperfections and our difference. And I feel like with people that are different than we are, our trust in one another, our basic trust level is tenuous at best. But it wouldn't just be a problem if this was about people who were of a different religion or political belief than I am. I think sometimes I have a problem believing that I can be in right relationship with the people that are in my home. And it's hard to admit my faults and mistakes with people in my church and my family and my workplace. Atonement requires that I admit my faults, but I'm often really scared to do so because I think that I'm going to be identified only by my mistakes. That I don't want to admit I'm wrong because I'm afraid people are only going to see me for the moments when I've messed up. I also know that in many moments of my life, I've kept score with other people. And instead of being in right relationship, I've kind of kept a tally of the moments where I've felt benefited and where I felt wronged. But atonement and right relationship is about being honest about my mistakes. And for a religion that talks about honesty, I can't endorse an approach of keeping my head in the sand about these things. I know that in my personal relationships, not admitting my mistakes or the moments when I've hurt other people didn't make those moments go away. All it did was keep me from moving into new life and new love and new relationships with the people around me. I think without any of the big, soaring theological language, when we talk about atonement, especially in our tradition, what we're talking about is an honest apology. Us, individuals, taking the first step to offer an honest apology and admit the moments when we failed or fallen short of the mark. At its basic moments, all this is admitting that our actions have consequences, that we have power, but also that our mistakes aren't the end of the story, that there's something bigger to us than our mistakes. Now, the practice of atonement and admitting our faults with others and asking to come back into right relationship, that's a difficult thing for us. And we want to focus on human goodness, and that's all true. But I know that for me, voicing my mistakes is simply giving voice to things that people know already. And when I ask for forgiveness, when I ask to get back in right relationship, it's almost got this magic quality where the room and our relationship opens up and there's room for grace and forgiveness and new understanding. Atonement, I think, is as much about forgiving others as it is being forgiven. and taking the risk, asking myself, what am I willing to risk to be forgiven, to get back in right relationship? This whole issue of atonement gets me thinking about the story from Hosea Ballou from our Universalist heritage and the notion he had of God as a loving parent. And he asked, if we had a child that had fallen into the mud, would we clean our child because we loved them, or would we only love them after they were cleaned? And this metaphor doesn't just have to be about human beings and God. For me, this means that we do not have to be perfect to be loved and loving, that we don't have to be scared to admit our faults and mistakes. But it does ask something difficult. This asks that we trust other people in our lives enough to believe that they're going to love us even in the midst of our faults and love us beyond our mistakes and faults. As Unitarian Universalists, I think we can reclaim a language and ritual and practice that isn't afraid to admit our shortcomings and the times when we've fallen short of the mark. Because our central message is a love that is bigger than our faults and a love that is bigger than any labels and bigger than our mistakes. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that human beings can be good and flawed all at the same time. That the reason we come together is to build a better world as we are. Atonement for me means realizing that caring for one another just as we are is exactly what is going to help make us healed and whole.